Well, welcome to another Q&A. I'm Joel Grimes with the Joel Grimes Academy, and here is where I have people send in questions. So we sent out a post this morning and asked for some questions, and we got quite a few, but I picked 4. I love doing this, and it's always nice to know what other people are kind of thinking, and I kind of live in a little bit of a bubble, so when you guys throw a question at me, it's kind of a nice thing to know what people are asking. So, someone says, have you primarily embraced the tilt-shift lenses for producing higher res portraits? All right, so I do a lot of tilt-shift stuff, and I cover this quite a bit. And you'll see me behind the scenes shooting tilt-shift lenses. Yes, to that question is, I do like the idea of having, I have a 50 megapixel camera. It's the Canon 5D SR. So I can easily go to, say, 80 to 100 megapixels like that with a tilt shift lens. But it's not all about megapixels. So there's a couple things that a tilt shift gives me that open the door to something that I wouldn't get with what we call a standard lens. And I don't use the tilt very often. I have, but it's not the tilt. What it is it's the ability to create a perspective that's different than what you would get with a normal, say, approach to a fixed lens or even a zoom lens, one that doesn't have a tilt. So let me explain that. And this goes back to the days when I studied or used all the formats. I had 35 millimeter medium format, a 4x5, even an 8x10 camera. So with each step up in your either your film size or now the sensor size, you get and I did a whole, at one point I did a presentation on this, and I did it I think at the Canon stage in New York at Photo Plus. And I think I have it on the Joel Grimes Academy. I believe I do. And what it is if you take an object in the foreground, and then let's say you have an object, say 10 feet from you, and then an object, say the mountains in the background. So if I take what would be a 84 degrees of angle of view. So at 84 degrees, roughly an 84 degrees on a 35 millimeter full frame, be around a 24 millimeter. I think it's 82, 84 degrees. To get that on a medium format, you'd end up with a 50 millimeter angle of view on a 6x7. When I used medium format Mamiya RZ, was 6x7 format, was a 50 millimeter, was at 84 degrees, 82, 84. And then a 84 degrees on a 4x5 was about a 90 millimeter lens. So it wasn't just that you needed a bigger, say a longer lens to get you the same amount of degrees of angle of view. It changed the perspective. So what it did was, if I had a 90 millimeter, which gave me 84 millimeter on a 4x5 degrees of angle of view, the subject, let's say I had a subject 10 feet from my foreground. So I had a foreground, let's say I had a fence here, a foreground, in the foreground, I had a subject, and then I had the mountains. I'd have 84 degrees, but my subject and the mountains would be compressed on a larger format. It'd be somewhat compressed. On a medium format, the same angle of view, it would be spread out a little bit more. So the subject would look further away from the fence, and the mountains will look further away. Then you do that on a full frame, say 35 millimeter, and it's even more stretched. And then on a APS, that's even more stretched. So when I use a tilt shift lens, what I'm doing is I'm creating, I have a 24, let's say I have a 24 tilt shift. I have a 24 millimeter perspective. Subject, foreground subject to the background. But then when I shift it, I get a wider angle of view. So if, let's say I go and I shift my 24 left and right, and I get what would be equivalent to a 16 millimeter, what a 16 millimeter would give me. But if I put my 16 millimeter on, that subject would be further back. It would be spread out. So a 17 millimeter tilt shift gives me about 11 millimeter. I don't know what the degrees is, but 11 millimeter, 10, 11 millimeter, what a lens would do. So you get this sort of interesting feel that you get the 24 millimeter feel, or a 50 millimeter feel, or a 90 millimeter feel, because Canon now has the 17, the 24. They used to have a 45. They have the 50. That's updated. They have the 90, which I just bought, and they have the 135. So they have at least a new line of 5 amazing tilt shift lenses. Cover everything you want. But they give me an option to create a feel that's a different feel than if, let's say, a client says, we want a really wide angle of view, and we got this, scenario, and I put my 11 millimeter on, it's going to be. But if I put my 17 on and shift it left and right, I get this crazy wide angle of view, but not that forced, stretched perspective of subject or foreground, subject, background. Does that make sense? So there's some other reasons why I use a tilt shift, not just gaining megapixels. I hope that explains it. I go through completely showing pictures and whatever in the Joel Grimes Academy, not that I'm pushing you toward that. How do you see portraiture 10 years from now? Well, I ask this question all the time when it comes to change, and we look at from film to digital. That was a big change. Well, you had glass plates and you went to film, gelatin-based film. And then before glass plates, there was like daguerreotypes and whatever. I mean, it was the development of photography keeps going. So now we have digital, and where will it be in 10 years from now? I don't know. We'll still be digital, but how will that look? I don't know. But I do know this, that when you shot glass plates and you wanted to get a good portrait, you still had to be a creative process. I mean, you had to be an artist to create something that's interesting. So the future is for artists. It'll always be for artists. There's always going to be a room for the artist to go and create. Doesn't matter the tools. So tools aren't important. It's what is your vision as an artist, and how do you get to where you want to go in terms as being an artist? I talk all about this too. I love talking about this concept of being an artist because we get so stuck on technical, and I love technical stuff. I love techniques. I love showing techniques. But if I only had 10 minutes with you and you said, Joel, what's the secret to success as a photographer? I wouldn't be talking about techniques. I'd be talking about being an artist and the business side. Of course, I do a lot on the business side. So in 10 years from now, it still takes an artist to create, and those are the people that are going to rock it. What is your advice on someone who wants to run their own photography business? Well, if you look at the tagline that I have on my blog, and I've had it for a while, and of course now the Joel Grimes Academy is be an artist, live your dream, create an income. So creating an income is an important part, I think, of being a photographer. Now, you may be retired, you may have a trust fund, you may have won the lottery, I don't know. You don't need to maybe make a living in photography, or you've made your money somewhere else. Maybe you want to just do photography on the side as a hobby, which is great. I love that too. In fact, I think it would be great if I had a situation where I had a big fat check and then I could just play as a photographer. I didn't have that option. I had to go make a living as a photographer. I had to fight, claw, scratch my way through the marketplace to get where I'm at today. So when it comes to running a business, you have to understand that the best photographers don't make the most money or aren't the most successful. But it's the ones that learn how to market. They learn the marketplace. Learn how to go and pick up the phone, make cold calls. I go through all this. I love it. In fact, I do talks all the time on the business side of photography, and it's one of those things that I think if I survive this industry to where I'm remembered by something, I hope it's my images, but I hope it's also the fact that I encourage photographers to chase their dream and make a living with what they love, their camera. And so it's important. You have to treat it like a business. And one of the hardest things, if you were selling vacuum cleaners door to door, that'd be one thing. But when you sell your baby, your soul of, you creating this masterpiece that you want the world to know, and you put that out there and someone says you suck, that is, or they get a rejection, that is really difficult. So mixing photography and a business is not an easy thing, but it's possible. I've been doing it for 40 years. Last question, because I can go all day. Any tips or tricks on retouching for colorblind photographers? Well, I'm colorblind. I don't see green. I have a lot of stories about it. Some of the gaffes I've done being colorblind. And so here's what I would say. When I started out as a photographer, I remember I was in high school. I remember when we went from black and white to color, and our assignment was to just take a color negative, put it in a color darkroom, and then make a print. And I made my first print. I came out, I was all excited, and I come to my teacher and I said, "What do you think?" And he looked at me, he said, "You're colorblind, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And he stopped me, he looked at me, he said, "Don't ever let your colorblindness keep you from chasing your dream." Now, that is incredible advice. Had I not probably had that firm sort of, directly in my face, statement, I might have thought I can't be a photographer because I'm colorblind, right? Today, and then when I started doing commercial work, I'd always kind of hide the fact that I was colorblind, but today I preach it from the mountaintop because I believe my colorblindness is, in fact, one of the greatest assets I possess as an artist. And I explain all this, and I talk about this a lot, and that is because it drives me down a path that puts me in a unique position. My work looks different than the masses because I'm forced to go down a path that I desaturate my work. I'm doing things. Color balancing isn't that important to me. Other things are important to me. And so lighting is important to me. The face, the portrait, the character, things that, well, if I was looking at color, I might not pay attention to. So being colorblind is a benefit. And I say that with all confidence, knowing that there are times when being colorblind, I'm like, whoa. So one of the things I do, it's a little tip, is when I have an image and I'm going, oh boy, is there any green in this? So I go over to hue saturation, I do adjustment layer, hue saturation. I go over to there's a master, and then you click on it, you say, okay, there's red, yellow, and there's green. So I click the green, or any color I want. Then I take my saturation, and so you go left, it goes desaturate. You go right, it makes whatever color you have. So green, it goes bright, it intensifies the green. So if you pull it all the way over, it goes neon. It's like flashing at you. And I go, there's green back in those windows. I didn't see green back in that factory windows. Oh, there's green back there. So I go, okay, maybe I want to pull that green back a little bit if I don't want that green, or whatever color I'm looking at. I do that with skin tones a lot. I will go to my red and yellow, I pull, and all of a sudden I get this like neon on the forearm, like, whoa, that's got a lot of red in it. I don't want that much red in it, so I'll pull back the red a little bit. I desaturate all my pictures anyways, and that's been my style. That's how I see the world around me. And so people go, I love that technique you're doing with your desaturation. How can I do that? I go, well, I don't know. I'm just colorblind. I just kind of do it. And I can tell you how, sort of. But I mean, the point is it's the fact that my colorblindness gives me an advantage in that it puts me down a path that's unique to me. So, all great questions. I would love to have you send me some questions, and do that. And also subscribe, and my wife always says, click the little bell. I'm not sure what that means. But subscribe, and then when we put out a new video, you get a notification. And we're going to be doing this as much as I can. We're doing all sorts of fun things on YouTube for you guys, and we look at history, photography, a business side of things, all sorts of fun stuff that I can pass on to you. All right. There you have it, another Q&A I like doing these, and I'm a good talker. So send your questions.